Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patricia Capella, the Conference Manager for Clarion Events Food and Beverage Portfolio, which produces several industry events, including the upcoming International Restaurant and Food Service Show of New York, which will be held March 8th through the 10th at the Javits Center in New York City. We invite you to visit foodandbevshows.com for more information on all of our upcoming events. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar, Leadership Awakening 2020, Welcome to the New Era Workplace, presented by Ed Doherty, founder of 1 Degree Coaching, who will provide an understanding of the generational workplace challenge. A few housekeeping notes before the presentation begins. All audience members are on listen-only mode, which means you are muted. We will be monitoring audience engagement on the dashboard and encourage you to participate by using the question pane. There will be time for questions and answers at the end of the session. This webinar, as well as others in our series, will be made available on our website in the coming week. Now, let me turn the program over to Ed. Ed?
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. 1 Degree is a boutique consultancy out of Philadelphia, and we focus on leadership training and building better workplaces by focusing on engagement and how leaders interact with their vision and then interact with their teams. Myself and Maria Campbell are part of a small team that works with industries big and small, from hospitality to hospitals and technology. So let me just tell you really quick a little bit about 1 Degree. 1 Degree, we believe that we can change the way people work, and we help organizations increase sales, profits, and productivity. And we do this by helping leaders to reinvigorate and re-inspire their teams. We believe that inspiration is the economic engine of most organizations. So what we do is we codify, we simplify culture, then connect organizational goals, visions, and values to the needs of people so people can buy in. And we teach managers how to be inspiring leaders. And we focus on these incremental improvements, hence 1 Degree, that impacts your bottom line while we're improving your quality of life. And the symbol you see to your left explains that. So our agenda today, is the new era workplace. We have noticed, myself being a baby boomer, I have noticed that there's been a lot of challenges. I talk to a lot of my baby boomer friends, and they come to me and say, what's up with these millennials? And what I discovered over many years of researching this amazing new era that is now upon us is that there's nothing wrong with millennials, and there's nothing wrong with anyone. It's just that this age-old problem, generational issues. So today what we want to look at is not the problem, although we will look at the problem in the beginning, but we do want to look at the solutions. You know, in 2020 is the year that there's an amazing generational handoff. Millennials aren't children anymore. They are average age now in their late 20s to 35, 36 years old. In 10 years, they all will be over 35. Their impact is going to be seismic. So it is, though, creating some very challenging workplace situations that we're going to talk about today. And every generation has different values, and they all want different things. I remember when I was a young person back in the 60s and 70s, you know, we had a value system that collided with the generation before us. And so we're still seeing that today. There's many generational stereotypes that have become very commonplace, which we eschew. And employee disengagement is still and consistently is rampant, and loyalty is a very rare commodity. So we have these 4 key intergenerational workplace challenges that we have identified. And they're challenges, but again, we're going to talk about the solutions. So everyone has a different origin story. They have different values and mindset. There's different company cultures and leadership styles. There's, in addition to that, very negative stereotypes that exist, and then that communication style and that learning style. So we're going to review some of these things today and hopefully help our listeners to build a better workplace. So let's start with first, this is the thing that drives me. This statistic drives me every day. I look at this and I say, how can this be true? There's been engagement surveys done on a national level for many, many years, and although engagement levels are improving a little bit, and I think that's the millennial impact on the workplace, there's still this unfortunate fact that there's a 75% disengagement rate in the United States. And what's disengagement? It means that 75% of people go to work every day and they're not happy. They're not happy with what they're doing. They're not happy with their jobs. And around that, unfortunately, is a lot of it has a lot of different impacts. The least being, although business people disagree, the financial impact. But it's also has many other unfortunate impacts. So this is the thing that drives 1 degree. We look at this and say, how can we help move the needle here in disengagement? And then let's take a look at a real quick definition of the generation gap. Generation gap is the difference in opinions, values, et cetera, between younger people and older people. Pretty simple definition to a very complex problem. Let's look at the generations. A lot of people say, what's a boomer? You know, who's in what generation? This is by Pew Research, and it shows that my mom and dad, both born in 1920, were what they call the greatest generation, or the silent generation. Very specific set of values and vision for their lives. Then along came the so-called boomers, and ages 55 to 73, and then our Generation X came along after the boomers, and then came the millennials, and now the new generation coming up is Generation Z, and we'll get into a few things about them. But that's I think a good generational definition there to give you a point of view on generational transitions. So this is what's happening right now. This is why there's this great generational handoff. Millennials are now becoming the largest generation in the labor force, starting in 2016. In 2020, and there's been different studies on this, but I think most agree that this is the year where the millennials really do start to, with quotes around it, take over the workplace, not only in volume, but now they're getting into leadership roles. And in this generational handoff, you can see, you know, where this all happens, where we all come and go generationally. So we believe that a lot of this is about origin stories. So different generations have different origin story. What's an origin story? An origin story is the story that you tell people when they ask you, tell me about yourself. And we've found that the economy has had a big impact on this generationally. If we look at this, when I look at, you know, the stories, my parents were born and grew up, you know, during World War II, the Depression, and they had a very different set of values, and their story was all about we sacrificed. They've been called the greatest generation, of course. They went through the Depression. There was a real collective mentality. There was very, very little individualism. It was a very social democracy back then, and the whole thing of World War II recovery, and then they continued to push through there. Baby boomers, of course, we had the Vietnam era, the hippies, and abundance, freedom, rebellion, these things that affected us. And then Gen X, they were the first generation's latchkey kids. They had this big global change, divorce, the crash of '87. And that's when the corporate ladder disappeared. And of course, our next generation, millennials, their moments were 9/11, the Great Recession, unbelievable student debt, and they're also entrepreneurial. Let's talk a little bit about some of the more negative things that are coming out of this generational handoff. Common generational stereotypes, and you know, we've done these seminars live, and what we'll do is we'll show these stereotypes, and the stereotypes, like who's the workaholic. So we'll first identify the generation, everybody raise hands. We'll say, okay, who are the workaholics? And it's very accurate. It's actually, if it wasn't sad, it's amusing and fascinating that how these stereotypes are so fixed in the workplace. and not loyal, out of touch, cynical, entitled, lazy, skeptical. And as you look at these, you can say which generation it is. I'm not going to apply those meanings or attach those generational stereotypes to these words, but it is very pervasive, and it is not productive. So let's talk about our common needs. Like, what do all generations want from work? We may have these different generational values, we have these backgrounds, but really, what is it that we all have in common? I think that's what we need to look at as a solution for this generational issue. So the 5 generational similarities in the workplace, let's start with number 1. Every human being on the planet wants a sense of purpose. This is something we all have in common. And everyone wants to learn something new. We also want our leaders to create a better workplace, have a great place to work. And we also want to work as independently as possible, is what we call autonomy, as we'll talk about later. And then we want a measure of success in our careers. So we look at these 5 similarities, and then what we're going to do is drill down on each one of these and how they can be helpful for you in your workplace. This is the model for a happy workplace. This is not a matter of opinion. This is a study, and I think some of you, if you're familiar with Dan Pink, and some of the studies that were done for the last almost 70 years on very high levels of government. These studies were done at Carnegie Mellon University and MIT. They were funded by the Federal Reserve Board, and they're government studies, and they keep coming up with these same 3 things that people want in order to be engaged, for people to be happy in the workplace. So you'll notice that it's this 3-part Venn diagram here, and it starts with, first, purpose. Human beings are purpose maximizers. We have a deep need for purpose. We want to make a contribution. We want meaning in work. We want to have an impact. Every human being is born with this in them. And so that's something, no matter what your generation, we all have in common. Next, human beings want mastery. They want a sense of accomplishment. They want progress and feedback. And there's been an old saying for many, many years, for most of you have probably read The 1-Minute Manager, that people who feel good about themselves, they do better work. And that's something that we've known through observation for years. We now have the scientific background back up to it. And it's a very, very important part of creating an ideal work environment. And then autonomy, or working unharassed, as I like to call it. It's that self-direction and that intrinsic reward, and be able to feel like you're an independent, productive person without being micromanaged. I like to say, a lot of people look at purpose, mastery, and autonomy, and they say, okay, I get it. But I think the best way to really get it is to talk about the opposite of that. If anybody ever asks you, what's the greatest place you ever worked? And this is what they will not say. They will not say, I worked at this place, it was incredible. Our leader told us nothing about what we were about or why we existed and what we were doing. And then, there was no training whatsoever. And then they micromanaged us. That's the opposite of purpose, mastery, and autonomy. And that always gets the point across. But that might sound familiar to some of you out there, that might be many workplaces that you've been in. So this proves that purpose, having a very strong purpose-driven organization where there is a mastery and a focus on getting better, and autonomy, and letting people to work unharassed. Okay, so that's the 3 elements right there: purpose, mastery, and autonomy. And if you want to learn more about that, Dan Pink has some great stuff in his book Drive. So let's talk about some solutions. We've seen the problems, let's talk about solutions. That's what 1 Degree is about. So here's some leadership reboot strategy for you. Number 1, this is the Stockdale paradox. You need to take stock, but don't lose faith. We've had a lot of clients that are very frustrated, and we say this is the most important thing. You can point the finger, be upset, play the blame game, but the bottom line is you have to be able to take stock, but don't lose faith. Embrace the change, understand your team's needs, and then define or redefine your values. and then update your leadership style. We'll go into these in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about this. So first, you have to connect with your team. The basic operating system for 1 Degree is what we call connect and direct. We've learned that human beings will not buy in or believe in your goals unless they feel safety and belonging. So you need to be able to connect to your team, and there's strategies for that. Let's assess if there's a real and abiding issue. Is it one person, 2 people are having an issue? Is it throughout the organization? It's worth a look. We don't have to panic and start looking around thinking everybody's disengaged because of the 75% disengagement level. Some organizations have higher engagement than others, but it's important to assess. And then, there's different strategies. There's engagement surveys. Some are good, some aren't so good. I think the best engagement survey, one of the first books I looked at on engagement was a book that was written called It's Your Ship by Michael Abrashov. A wonderful book about a naval captain who came aboard a ship, took over as a captain of the ship that had horrible metrics, big turnover, everybody was disengaged. And what he did was he sat down with 300 crew members one at a time, and he did a half-hour one-on-one with each one of them. And from that came the turnaround and took this ship from the worst ship in the fleet to the best ship in the fleet back in the 1990s. One-on-ones are the number one way to connect with people and to know that they hear their voice, collect information, but also so that they can have that sense of safety and belonging. And then leaders need to be optimistic. You have to be optimistic and open-minded. It's often tough because a big part of our consultancy is that we have a lot of folks that are entrepreneurial. They are at the top of their organization and they are alone. So a big part of what we do is we help leaders in that coaching capacity to stay optimistic and stay in positive mindset. It's very, very important. Your people are watching you and you need to stay optimistic. So let's take a look at how you become agents of change or how you embrace this change. Let's look at some steps. First, just select one thing from each generation and state how that unique value add to the organization. By the way, millennials are often put down because they want purpose. And they're often put down because they want autonomy. A lot of times, and I have found this to be true, that a lot of millennials are so excited by their purpose and passion and their quest for autonomy that mastery gets missed sometimes, that they want to move quickly through the organization, they want to be in charge quickly. There is nothing wrong with that. They're the first generation, actually, that got it right. They have it all right. I think where they're challenged is working on the mastery part. And I think a return to what I would do, I would say, look, boomer, right? You probably worked your way up the ladder. You were an apprentice situation. But guess what? Purpose and autonomy is an awesome thing. It's the lifeblood of happiness in the work environment. But how about working on mastery with your millennial? So that would be one example of how you would take one thing that each generational has and they all learn from each other. Also now, take this opportunity to re-inspire and reinvigorate your team. Again, what I said before was that leaders need to be optimists. By connecting to your people, taking that opportunity to really revisit what's important in your organization. With 1 Degree, one of the first thing we do, and we'll talk about this very briefly in a moment, is the very first thing we look at is why. We look at why does your organization exist? And it turns out that human beings, they need why in order to engage. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Simon Sinek. We're big fans of his Golden Circle. And inspiration, again, being the economic engine of any great organization, it comes from when people are turned on. Inspiration is when people are turned on, and not only are they turned on, but they want to help you with your vision and your goals. And it's usually done through a value system. So we think that it's an important thing to revisit your culture. Is your culture codified? Are your goals clear? And re-inspire your team. Get everybody together, and give them a clear vision to follow. And then leader, you have to follow that as well. So, and again, connect through similarities and build trust by displaying role respect. Turns out, again, all these studies that we've learned from, that everyone has different personalities. We've all known that, but there's also these role strengths that we all have. My role strength is I'm a vision mover. I wanted to be a visionary, but I'm not. And when I got over it, I discovered that my role as a vision mover, through a role assessment that we use here at 1 Degree, is exactly where I want to be. And because I am a coach and I move visions. Next to a vision mover, you need other roles, people with role strength. Founders of companies need a role set called a communicator, somebody who can actually spread the good virus throughout the organization. And the role assessment that we use, there's 10 different roles. And some people share roles, but every role has a partner. What happens is, unfortunately, what it all drills down to is that you have basically 4 different adult learning styles. You have watchers, thinkers, you have people who are feelers, and so all these different role strengths are usually annoying to the other role strengths. The person who is a thinker or a watcher will be annoyed by someone who's a doer, who's an action mover. And so you have to be aware of these differences and embrace it and say, look, the doers and the watchers, we can get along if we just respect our roles. And there's a lot more that we can work on. So let's get inspired by a culture-focused organization who are more productive and more cohesive. And you got to start forming your culture-focused organization. Let's talk about what is culture. There's these words used lately, and they become hackneyed, and they become so commonplace, they really lose their meaning. And culture is one that is certainly overused sometimes. And very few people, when I ask them, can give me a good definition of what culture is. This is what culture, my favorite definition of culture is, it's what human beings do in the absence of written rules. What that means is human beings are tribal creatures. They naturally form cultures. You see cultures all the time manifest. Go to a football game and you'll see some major tribal behavior where everybody's in their colors and they're painted and they're ready to go, and they have this passion for their team. It's the same thing in a company. People want to be in a culture that aligns to their vision of what their life is going to be. They want to be aligned, their role to be respected and be a part of this culture. What human beings do in the absence of written rules, we'll just do it. So I always encourage leaders to have a really big culture that's very well defined. You codify your culture through your vision, your values, and your mission, 3 very different why, how, what components. And then live your culture, and then people will coalesce around it. And if they don't, then maybe they're on the wrong tribe. And then number 5 is focus on building happy, high-performing teams with your organization, and building these bridges to these newer possibilities. We talk about happy, high-performing teams. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have dared to say happy when I was working in some organizations. It seemed frivolous. I wouldn't use the word love either. I use both words now liberally, because human beings, when they are happy, are 30% more productive than when they're not happy. Disengagement is unhappy. So why is it that we have this horrible disengagement rates, and we have unhappy people? that equates to billions and tens of billions of dollars of loss of revenue to our economy. But it has to start with, again, this is a very generational thing. If I said to my father, I want a job and I want to be happy, as in his generation, that was so frivolous, it would anger him. My generation started to focus a little bit on that. Now the millennials are taking it to the next level, and they're saying, no, we demand happiness in the workplace. And they're absolutely right, because it's biology. It's not some frivolous, new movement. It's how people literally have become better versions of themselves by finding that right place in the right culture, doing the right things the right way. And so these are some steps to change. Let's look at some important touch points that we can consider. So first thing is you have to understand your team's needs. And again, some of my boomer friends will say, oh yeah, really? That's because the boomer tends to lead in an old style of leadership that we're going to talk about in a second, called updating your leadership style. I am a reformed old style leader myself. I was a chef many years ago. It was my first career, and my godlike position could not be questioned. But I discovered that's not the way you connect to people and really get them to buy in or coalesce around what your vision or your goals are. So let's start with understanding your team's needs and why this is so important. So first, dear leader, your team is not you. One of the common things I have heard from many clients over the many years is, why aren't these people doing blah, blah, blah the way I envision it? And why aren't they basically like me? Well, they're not you. As a matter of fact, they're not you, and that's a good thing. They don't have your perception. Perception is not reality, folks. The bottom line is that there is no reality. It's only perception. It's the origin stories and your role, strength, your vision of what the world should be. All those things are in your mind. And then somebody else has their life history and all the things that they've battled and they've come up against and experience. There's a million things that inform perception. And somehow leaders believe that their team should be mind readers, which is, you really think about it, not really a fair thing to do. So there's a real blame game that goes on with a lot of leaders and a lot of finger pointing in the beginning, and we help transition people over from that. And again, respect is very, very important. I cringe when I hear my boomer leader friends talking about millennials like it's some defect to want purpose, to want to have independence, to be motivated the way they're motivated. And there's so much we can learn from them. So the generational role and purpose, respect, so important. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can actually work with that. Understand the individual's personal goals and values. The one-on-ones that I had talked about before that we'll talk about again, it is so important to collapse the gap between the company's vision and values and where they're going and where the company's trying to go. People will not follow you just simply because your signature is on their paycheck. You have to inspire them and show them how, their goals and their values, that they can have those things here on their journey towards happy destiny. Maybe they're very motivated, entrepreneurial, spirited workers in your workplace. Find a way to show them that what they're working on in the future is right here. There's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of stereotypical, millennials aren't loyal, all that kind of talk. They're not loyal because they have a clearer vision than we did. And they also know that the loyalty quotient is not what it used to be in the workplace. My father worked for the same company for 45 years. I even have his gold watch when he retired. Those loyalties don't exist within companies. So why should the millennial be loyal when they don't? That my father's generation did. So things have changed, but we still demand loyalty from them, but we don't give them that much in return. It's ironic, but it's important to point out. And then align them to the organizational goals and those common values, as I had mentioned. And again, this is very important. This is actually the first thing we do, is that we define or redefine, if you haven't done it, your own culture. So this wonderful thing that we call culture, what people do in the absence of written rules, all human beings, we are wired to understand, communicate through a codified culture. What's codification? It's really complicated, vague stuff, cultures, right? It's not something that's on your P&L. It's on a line item. You can't point to it. Norman Vincent Peale had a great, one of my favorite quotes was like, I've never seen a good definition of spirit, but I know what it looks like when I see it. And that, to me, is the embodiment of what culture is about. When you see that spirit, when you walk into an organization and everybody's engaged and everyone's happy and they're focused and there's this amazing teamwork going on, that is a result of codified culture. Someone told them why we're doing what we do. People don't care about what you do, they care about why you do it. And then when you discover the organization's transcendent purpose, you're tapping now into this basic human need that people need something beyond a paycheck. They need a sense of purpose. And then communicate, through your cultural codification. So what is a cultural codification? Again, it's your vision. Years ago, they would give you a mission statement and say, we are a restaurant, we do good food and service. That's a what. Turn that around and say, we want to make life better. As my good friend and client, Nick Bayer, says at Saxby's Coffee, suddenly it changes everything. You're not going to work for a coffee company. You're going to work for a place that makes life better. And everybody wants to do that, right? So, and that gives this wonderful transcendent purpose that you can follow. The how of your why, the how of purpose, is core values. You hear a lot about core values. Actually, core values, that has been so abused, the whole idea of core values, because people will create them in a vacuum. They'll stick them on a poster in the wall, and then they're forgotten, or leadership does not live the value system. Very damaging. I tell my clients all the time, do not create a value system you're not going to live it, because your people will be watching. You'll be creating an ideal. We respect, we care, integrity, dignity, all those things, and then we don't live them. And you actually make things worse that way. So define your values, communicate them through your codified culture, but then you have to live your values. So important. Let's talk about this updated leadership style that I alluded to earlier. I'm sure many of you have read the wonderful Jim Collins book called Good to Great. It was a 5-year study done by an amazing team, 35 people, looked at this question: why do some organizations have good results and others have great results? And then how do the companies go from good to great? How does that happen? Well, they did this 5-year study, and what they found out was completely counterintuitive. They couldn't even believe, by the way, what they had discovered. They couldn't believe it. It didn't make any sense to them, because it was the opposite of what everybody else was doing. They were looking for that power manager and that one-of-a-kind leader who had charisma and all this, it was all about the leadership and this ego-driven situation. Well, that's position-based power, and it does not work with most human beings. As a matter of fact, it doesn't work at all with newer generations. Again, people don't care about what you are, they care about why you're doing it. So you move from this position-based power, just so I said so, my name is on your check, you better listen to me, which is what I came from, to this, what they call level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership is this paradoxical blend of this, service to the team. By the way, it's also known as servant leadership, and also an unshakable focus on business results. So this character would do this level 5 leader that they found in the Good to Great study was doing unbelievable things in these companies, but they were sometimes introverts. They were self-effacing. They would just give credit to the team, and then when there was a problem, they would take the blame on themselves, as opposed to many leaders who do the opposite. They're the ones that were at the head of all 11 Good to Great companies. There was this amazing servant leader, this heart of a servant leader running these companies. And a lot of people hear servant leadership and they think it's a weakness. No, it's actually a strength, because it makes people buy in. And they follow you not because of who you are or what your title is, they follow you because of what you represent. And that is an important distinction. And it's a rare commodity. So at One Degree, one of our central principles is connect and direct. We believe that you have to connect. Do you want high engagement? Do you want high profits? Do you want happy, high performing teams? Do you want all these things? Well, you must connect before you can direct. You can't walk into a room and start bossing around strangers, right? They have to have some level of belief that you care before they'll give their better portion of themselves to you and buy into what you want to get done. Unless you're working alone and you don't want to build a team, I'm here to tell you in no uncertain terms that you have to learn how to serve your team and connect. And then when you do, then you can direct them. Another very, very important thing is everyone should become a student of human nature. There's wonderful things out there from Simon Sinek to Dan Pink. I love Sean Aker, an incredible author who talks about the happiness advantage in the workplace and in life in general. Those three authors and thought leaders have been very influential on the One Degree way. And we've discovered that, you know, becoming a student of human nature, you have to start looking at people in a different way. When you're a leader, you get yourself off of the leadership throne and start to look at your people as who they are and understand them and what motivates them. So important. And you know, you increase engagement levels, loyalty, and productivity by putting your team first. And again, it's a very counterintuitive idea. A lot of people don't understand really what servant leadership is. True servant leaders are not to be trifled with. They have a very strong vision, and again, they have a strong business will, but they serve the team, and the team knows that they have that the leader has their back. Okay, so let's connect that culture to the team needs. So we mentioned we want to codify the culture. You have your vision, which is why you do what you do, your values, how you do it, your mission, what you do, and then your company goals. So you want to be able to codify them, and that's One Degree does that very first thing we do with our clients. The next thing is we're going to go over to number 3 here, because let's take a look at what we talked about before. What does the team need, right? The team needs purpose. It needs that mastery. It needs autonomy. Well, leaders, and if there's anyone on here who is a C-level, CEO, COO, even CFOs, your managers and yourself are the thing that connects the codified culture to what the team needs to thrive. And this is often the missing ingredients. Leaders as vision movers, you have to build trust. You have to connect individual need to the organizational need. Then you have to coach to competence levels, and then you have to promote autonomy. And again, all this is a big part of what we do here at One Degree, but we have discovered that this is how you actually get the buy-in for people to believe in what you believe and to help you to reach your goals. So I think we're going to get pretty close to finishing on time here. Every human being, a little quote that I made up for this presentation, every human being has a unique purpose that drives their behavior. Values are how we relate through culture and can either divide or unite us. And that's what's happening in the generational workplace. We're being divided by a value system. You can even see it politically, what's happening now in our country. So it's the leader's job to connect the individual's need to the organization's visions, values, and goals. So I hope you enjoyed our little talk, and I want to just focus you on some more information. Thank you so much, and you can connect with us here at One Degree. There's a link on the presentation. I know you're going to get a copy of this, I was told, so everybody will have this, to Ed Doherty on LinkedIn, my partner Maria, and our other team members like Al Paris, wonderful people who can help you. Again, we do business coaching, team and executive coaching, leadership, storytelling, community leadership classes. And so I also want to focus you on the ODC website. Please check out what we're doing. We have these wonderful series. There's lots of extras there for you to download, great information. Please like us on Facebook, of course. We want you to connect and subscribe. We also have a YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. I understand we're going to have a little Q&A, and I will turn it back over to Patricia. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, thanks, Ed, so much. That was a really interesting and very in-depth webinar. I really appreciate your time today. I know that I certainly learned a lot. We do have a couple of questions here, so I am going to get started. The first question that had come through is in regards to team and happiness. Can you give an example on how to make a team happy? Are there team building programs that can be implemented?
Yes. Happiness is a function of respect. And as far as see, everybody has a vision of what their happy destiny should look like. And I think if you focus on first the codification of your culture so that everybody has something in common to focus on, the vision of a company's leader and the value system becomes the company's GPS. And happiness comes when we all agree what our values are, how we're going to do our why, and then we can all live in a fair harmony if we live through that value system. And I have found that's the thing that increases happiness in the workplace more than anything else. And it's a consistent focus on those value systems.
Great, thank you very much. I know you had mentioned a couple of different authors. We had some questions around that. One was, people are wondering who was the author of the book From Good to Greatness that you mentioned?
Good to Great is Jim Collins. The book was published in, I believe, the year 2000. It was a study that was started with about 35 companies, and they drilled it down to about 11. It, to me, is the DNA of success. There's why, how, and what all over it. There's these patterns in all of these thought leaders' works that if you see it, and Good to Great, why some companies make the leap and others don't, really shows this paradoxical thing that goes on inside organizations. You have a servant leader who builds a team first. Strategy came last. It's the opposite of what everybody does. And I recommend this book to every single person who is interested in how business works or how life works. It's the scientific proof that this silly stuff like happiness actually works, and these frivolous things like servant leadership is not just some trend. It's actually what human beings need to thrive.
Great, thank you. I know I just wrote that down. So again, that was Good to Great by Jim Collins.
That's right.
And then I don't know if this was the same one, but we had a question here asking who the author is on the Human Nature book that you recommend.
Well, there's a couple there. There's Sean Aker is phenomenal, and they have great videos, by the way. If you go on YouTube, Sean Aker's video called The Happiness Advantage, that's a great introduction. And then Simon Sinek, who is, everybody knows him as, the Start With Why guy. He's the one that codified how the human brain is wired to follow purpose, and that people don't care about what you do, which is how everybody always sells, right? They sell like, what you do, not why you do it. People don't care about why you do what you do. They don't care about what you do. They care about why you do it. So Simon Sinek, Start With Why. I'm reading his brand new book called The Infinite Game, which is phenomenal. He's written books on servant leadership. So he's an amazing thought leader. And then Sean Aker, of course, the wonderful Harvard-trained psychologists who does the happiness advantage.
Great, thank you. Another question was around the community groups that you talked about. They were wondering what those community groups are and do they happen around the country?
Community groups. Oh, our workshops. I'm sorry. Yes, we have I've never heard. We have different workshops and we have different events that we do. Every month we have a local leader, from our mayor to Nick Bayer at Saxby's to other local entrepreneurs come and share their stories. We call them business briefs. We also do seminars here at our 1 Degree offices in Philadelphia, but we also have a wonderful YouTube channel. If you go to our YouTube channel and you subscribe, you'll see we've done video of all of our events, so you can actually get a taste of what we're doing in these events, the business briefs. Also, in April, we'll be in New York City doing an event as well. So we're starting to move around. We're moving outside of our enclave of Philadelphia as this momentum is growing. So
wonderful, and we hope to have you, into our portfolio soon as well. So, we have another question here around millennials. While it is fair to assume that millennials are driven by resonance to purpose, most of them haven't figured out their life purpose yet. How do we develop them to help discover this?
Well, that's a great question. It's something we do with all of our clients. If you look at, there's a book called Find Your Why, by the way, by Simon Sinek. So, which we use to first help an individual discover their why, and then we codify the why for the company. And that overlap, it's a Venn diagram overlap, where we're saying, like, what is this individual's why? What is their purpose? And how can we attach it to the organizational why, so there's real engagement. So, some of that is on our the bonus material that we have, and you'll be able to see that in all of, if you click on and join our different stuff there. But bottom line is that the millennial who is purpose driven, all he has to do is answer the question, and you have to answer the question, what do I want, what do I want to do or give in order to have an impact in life? And it's a simple statement: to blank contribute so that blank have an impact. That's a why statement. It's very simple. It all comes out of understanding your origin stories. My origin stories were positive. Some are, some aren't. But in this great book, like I said, by Simon Sinek called Find Your Why, I would suggest that everybody do that, because now I get up in the morning and instead of saying I'm going to work to be a consultant, I wake up in the morning and say that I am going to help teams thrive by helping to increase engagement levels in the workplace and make a better workplace. Sounds a lot more fun than I'm going to be a consultant.
And then actually we're going to end here with our last question. For those solo entrepreneurs growing their business and now surrounding themselves with a team, what 3 pieces of leadership advice would you give them?
Well, I alluded to it. You have to understand your role as a leader, and that you're there to connect your vision and your goals to your people's. You have to be a people developer. I mean, you have to stop being a boss and a manager and start understanding that the only way to get people to really help you reach your goals is you have to start thinking that you're an educator / people developer. I dare say you have to really love people. You have to care deeply about them, because they're going to know if you do or you don't. You have to have a level of empathy. If you don't, find somebody who can, because people don't. Your team, 80% of what your team learns from you is nonverbal, and so that's so important. And really connect to your people. You get to know, again, their vision and values, their goals, the one-on-one is the most important thing you can do. There's every week we do a little blurb on LinkedIn, and the one-on-one is something I talk about a lot. You got to connect individually with people, and then they're not going to engage unless they really do have that sense that you really do care. So the definition for me of servant leadership, 3 things very quickly, is you got to love people, you got to care about them, you got to become a student of human nature, and then you have to take responsibility for your team, for yourself, and be that optimist in your organization.
That's really great advice, and I think a great way to end this webinar. I love that. So thank you so much for your time today. And I also wanted to just remind everyone, as Ed had pointed out, you will be receiving a link, an email link with the webinar, so you can listen to this again. It will also be posted on our foodandbevshows.com site. And thank you so much again. We really enjoyed having your expertise today.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.